In the 1950s, Jackie Gleason was so powerful that CBS wrote him an $11 million check on a napkin just to keep him from going to another network. Every Saturday night, 40 million people tuned in to watch The Great One. But behind the jokes and fame, his own daughters barely knew him. When his will was read in 1987, his daughters weren't surprised by the shocking numbers. They were heartbroken by what those numbers meant. This is the story of a man who could make everyone happy, except the people who needed him most. Jackie Gleason was born on February 26, 1916, in Brooklyn, New York. His father worked as an insurance salesman, while his mother managed the house. They lived on Chauncey Street in Brooklyn, surrounded by the busy, colorful streets of the city. Jackie's first taste of entertainment came when his father took him to see a show. He was only 6, but he never forgot the feeling of watching the performers and hearing the crowd. From that moment, he dreamed of being on stage one day. But Jackie's childhood wasn't easy. When he was just 9, his father left the family. Before leaving, his father did something cruel. He burned every photo of himself in the house, erasing his memory from their lives. This left Jackie and his mother with nothing. His mother had to start working as a subway change booth attendant, spending long hours underground to earn enough money to survive. They moved to a small apartment, and Jackie spent most of his time alone. Without his father around and his mother working all day, Jackie started skipping school and hanging out in pool halls. He learned how to hustle for money and get by on his own. When Jackie was 19, another tragedy struck. His mother became seriously ill, but they were too poor to afford proper medical care. Jackie tried to help her himself, but it didn't work. She passed away, leaving Jackie completely alone. He had no family, no money, and nowhere to go. All he had was 36 cents in his pocket. It was the middle of the Great Depression, and life was hard for everyone. But for Jackie, it was especially bleak. He had no plan and no hope, until a friend named Sammy Birch told him about a job in Reading, Pennsylvania. It wasn't much, just a week-long gig at a nightclub called Tiny's Chateau. But it would pay $19. For someone with nothing, it felt like a lifeline. Tiny's Chateau was a rough bar filled with truckers and miners who loved to heckle performers. On his first night, Jackie wore his best suit and tried telling borrowed jokes, but the crowd hated him and booed him off the stage. Humiliated but determined, he sat at the bar and drank heavily. By his next show, Jackie was drunk and decided to ditch his planned jokes. Instead, he insulted the audience, banged on a piano he couldn't play, and did clumsy somersaults. To his surprise, the crowd loved it. That night, Jackie discovered 2 things that would change his career forever: the magic of improvisation and the boost he felt from alcohol. With this newfound confidence, Gleason began working hard on his act. He realized his size, almost 300 pounds, could be part of the joke. Instead of feeling embarrassed, he turned it into comedy gold, cracking lines like, "I'm not fat, I'm just easy to see." He also became a master at handling hecklers. One night in Atlantic City, a drunk yelled insults about his weight. Without missing a beat, Jackie fired back, "I may be fat, pal, but you're ugly, and I can diet." The room erupted in laughter. His signature move, a wild-eyed grin he called the Gleason gleam, always brought down the house. By 1940, Jackie had polished his routine to perfection. He was earning $250 a week, which was a lot of money back then. Off stage, he became known as a hard-drinking, larger-than-life personality who could light up any room. He threw wild parties that lasted until dawn and bought drinks for entire bars without thinking twice. But his big break came when he landed a spot at Manhattan's Club 18, a famous venue where comedians were expected to roast the audience. He roasted anyone, no matter who they were. One night, he spotted Frank Sinatra in the crowd and joked, "Ladies and gentlemen, Frank Sinatra is here." Or maybe it's a broomstick in a bow tie. I can't tell from here. Sinatra laughed so hard, he became a lifelong fan. During this time, Gleason also created characters inspired by the people he saw in the club. Two of them, Reginald Van Gleason III and Joe the bartender, would later become famous on television. Hollywood couldn't ignore him for long. In 1941, Jack Warner, the head of Warner Brothers, watched Gleason perform and was blown away. After the show, he offered Jackie a screen test. Gleason, ever the joker, replied, "Screen test? Just give me a mirror, and I'll do it right here." Warner laughed and offered him a contract on the spot, paying $250 a week. Jackie celebrated the only way he knew how, by buying drinks for everyone at the club, running up a tab almost as big as his new paycheck. The next day, Jackie boarded a train to Hollywood with a hangover, but high hopes. Interestingly, Gleason's first credited film role was in Navy Blues, where he played a minor character named Tubby. His next big chance came in Larceny, Inc. in 1942, where he acted alongside famous stars like Edward G. Robinson. Gleason played a not-so-smart ex-convict named Hobart, showing off his knack for physical comedy and quick humor. Despite these early wins, Gleason wasn't happy in Hollywood. He didn't like the strict rules of the movie studios, so he took a big risk and went back to New York to try his luck there. This turned out to be the right move for his career. When Gleason returned to New York in 1943, he went back to performing in nightclubs, slowly building his reputation again. His big break came in 1944 on Broadway with a show called Follow the Girls. It was a fun musical comedy that ran for 2 years and was a big hit, especially with soldiers on leave during World War II. Gleason played a funny character named Bubbles, and his performance wowed both audiences and critics. People loved his jokes, his singing, and even his dancing. Critics said he was so good that he nearly stole the entire show. Gleason's first big moment on TV came in 1948 on a show called Toast of the Town, which later became The Ed Sullivan Show. He appeared in the very first episode, performing a sketch that introduced a character from what would later become the Honeymooners. In this act, he played a frustrated pinball player, and his mix of comedy and emotions made the audience laugh and cheer. Gleason got a standing ovation, even though he was only paid $200 for the performance, but the exposure was priceless. After that, offers started pouring in, and CBS quickly became the network where Gleason would do his best work. In 1949, Gleason got his first TV series, The Life of Riley. It was a comedy about a clumsy factory worker named Chester A. Riley. Gleason wasn't the first pick for the role. The creators originally wanted Groucho Marx, but he turned it down. Gleason brought warmth and humor to the character, and critics loved how real he made Riley feel. Even though the show won an Emmy, Gleason only stayed for 1 season because of a contract issue with his old movie studio. While this could have been a setback, it led to something even bigger. Jackie Gleason's life changed forever when he became the host of Cavalcade of Stars on July 15, 1950. At 34 years old, he wasn't even the first choice. He was brought in at the last minute to replace the previous host, who had suddenly left. No one expected much from him, but Gleason shocked everyone. Within weeks, the show's ratings shot up by 40%, and he became a star almost overnight. He started off earning $750 a week, but as his popularity grew, his salary quickly climbed to $3,500 a week, an enormous amount at the time. Gleason didn't just perform, he created something entirely new. He introduced unforgettable characters like Ralph Cramden, a grumpy but lovable bus driver, played alongside Alice, his equally sharp-tongued wife. In 1952, Gleason's career hit a new high when CBS offered him an $11 million contract. It wasn't just about the money. It gave him complete control over his show. This kind of freedom was unheard of at the time. CBS wasn't even his first choice. He had almost signed with NBC for $9 million. But while at a New York restaurant, CBS President William Paley overheard Gleason talking about NBC's offer. Paley quickly wrote $11 million on a napkin, handed it to Gleason, and the deal was done right there. This contract made him the highest-paid TV star of his time. Adjusted for today, it would be worth over $100 million. The pressure to succeed was huge, but Gleason delivered. In his first year with CBS, he produced 42 live shows, wrote hundreds of pages of comedy sketches, and even recorded albums of music. His variety show, The Jackie Gleason Show, became the most-watched program on Saturday nights. His catchphrases like, "How sweet it is," and "To the moon, Alice," became part of everyday language. His success was so big that CBS rearranged its entire Saturday lineup around him. By the late 1950s, Gleason was known as Mr. Saturday Night. His show drew 40 million viewers each week, unbelievable numbers even today. His influence extended beyond TV. After featuring a brand of beer on his show, sales of that beer skyrocketed by 78% in a single week. His dedication to his audience was unmatched. In 1964, he performed an entire live show with a fever of 103 degrees because he refused to let his fans down. But the non-stop work took a toll on his health. By the late 1960s, Gleason was exhausted, and his show came to an end in 1970. Even so, his impact on television was undeniable. Meanwhile, there is another big achievement in Gleason life: The Honeymooners. It started small, but became one of the most loved shows in TV history. On October 5, 1951, a short skit called Bread aired on Cavalcade of Stars. It was just under 6 minutes long, but it introduced the world to Ralph Cramden, played by Jackie Gleason, and his wife Alice, played by Pert Kelton. People loved it so much that it became a regular part of Gleason's variety show. But getting The Honeymooners on air wasn't easy. Pert Kelton, the original Alice, was replaced by Audrey Meadows. Officially, Kelton left for health reasons, but it later came out she had been blacklisted during the McCarthy era. Even Meadows had to fight for the role. Gleason thought she was too pretty to play a working-class wife. To prove him wrong, she sent him photos of herself early in the morning without makeup. It worked. She became Alice, and her sharp wit and humor made her unforgettable. The show's set was also very real. Unlike other TV homes, the Cramdens' apartment looked simple and rough, just like the Brooklyn apartment Gleason grew up in. When the full series started on October 1st, 1955, it aired after the Perry Como Show and became a hit. This version, called the Classic 39, only ran for one season, ending in September 1956. Even though it was short-lived, it made a huge impact. The show was different because it showed a real working-class couple. Ralph was loud and frustrated, but Alice always kept him grounded. Their fights and love felt real, and viewers saw themselves in the characters. The show's influence didn't stop there. It inspired other sitcoms like The Flintstones, which was basically a cartoon version of Ralph and Alice set in prehistoric times. Ralph's famous lines, like "To the moon, Alice," became so well known that when an astronaut named Ralph Cramden landed on the moon in 1971, he joked, "Tell Alice I finally made it." Even after the original episodes ended, the Honeymooners stayed alive. Between 1957 and 1970, Gleason made 68 more sketches for his variety show. Then, in 1985, he found 80 lost sketches in his vault. These were longer than the originals, and when they were released, fans loved them just as much. Jackie Gleason was always full of surprises. In 1952, he shocked everyone by stepping into music. His first album, Music for Lovers Only, was a huge hit. It sold over 500,000 copies and stayed on the Billboard charts for an unbelievable 153 weeks. What made this even more amazing was that Jackie couldn't read or write music. He would sit at a piano, figure out the tunes one note at a time, and let a music director write it down. The result was a dreamy, unique sound, with cornetist Bobby Hackett playing soft, foggy solos that listeners loved. Between 1952 and 1969, Jackie released over 20 albums, all of them successful. People couldn't believe a comedian could make such beautiful music, but Jackie proved them wrong. In 1960, Jackie took on a new challenge, Broadway. He starred in Take Me Along, a musical based on a play by Eugene O'Neill. Jackie played Uncle Sid Davis, a man dealing with drinking problems and unspoken love. This was not the funny man people knew from TV. It was a serious role with real emotions. Jackie amazed everyone with his performance and won the Tony Award for Best Actor in a Musical. The show itself was a big success, getting 7 Tony nominations, including Best Musical. Jackie showed he could not only make people laugh, but also move them with his acting on stage. Then, in 1961, Jackie went to Hollywood and stunned the world again. He played Minnesota Fats in The Hustler, a movie about pool hustlers. Jackie's role was quiet and powerful, and he became the perfect rival to Paul Newman's wild, ambitious character. Jackie didn't need help with the pool scenes either. He was a great player in real life. The movie was a hit, and Jackie was nominated for an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. He didn't win, but the nomination was a big deal and proved he was more than just a comedian. Jackie kept taking on new challenges. In Soldier in the Rain, 1963, he played a smart and serious character, working alongside Steve McQueen in a story about friendship. It was different from anything Jackie had done before. Around the same time, he starred in Gigot, 1962, a movie he helped create. Jackie played a mute janitor living in Paris, and he had no lines at all. He had to show all the emotions, sadness, kindness, and joy, just through his actions. The movie wasn't a big hit, but it was clear Jackie had poured his heart into it. Jackie Gleason's personal life was as colorful and chaotic as the characters he played on TV. Over the course of his life, he got married 3 times, each relationship bringing its own drama. His first marriage to Genevieve Halford in 1936 started with a bold move. Jackie proposed to her at a nightclub in front of her date. They stayed married for 34 years, but it was far from happy. Jackie's constant partying and cheating made things difficult. Genevieve, being a devout Catholic, refused to grant him a divorce, even though they lived separately for many years. They finally ended things legally in 1970, after being apart for 16 years. Despite the long separation, they had 2 daughters, Geraldine and Linda. But Jackie wasn't much of a father. On Christmas, he would spend only half an hour with his family before rushing off to celebrate with his friends. His absence left its mark on his children, though they carried on with their lives. Just 10 days after his divorce, Jackie married Beverly McKittrick, a secretary he'd met at a country club. Their wedding was quiet and took place in England. However, this marriage didn't last long. After 4 years, Jackie filed for divorce. In 1975, he reconnected with Marilyn Taylor, a dancer whose sister had worked on his TV shows. They quickly tied the knot in Miami, only 27 days after his second divorce was finalized. This time, the marriage lasted. Marilyn stayed with Jackie until his death in 1987, giving him some much-needed stability in his later years. Jackie's love for partying went hand in hand with his heavy drinking. His favorite drink was whiskey with coffee, and he was known to drink more than anyone else in Hollywood. He threw wild parties, so loud that hotels had to soundproof his rooms to avoid complaints. His favorite spot was Toots Shor's bar in Manhattan, where his drinking became legendary. Once, he passed out drunk on the floor, and instead of helping him, the bar's owner left him there as a lesson. Jackie's drinking affected not just his personal life, but also his work. On set, he was unpredictable, charming one minute and yelling the next. Food was another one of Jackie's vices. His weight went up and down so much that he kept 3 separate wardrobes for different sizes. He loved to eat. A single meal could include oysters, spaghetti, roast beef, mashed potatoes, vegetables, dessert, and even an extra steak for dessert. Despite having a gym at his home in Miami, he rarely exercised. His unhealthy lifestyle caught up to him. In 1978, he had severe chest pains that led to triple bypass surgery. By 1986, he was diagnosed with cancer and other health issues, including diabetes. He passed away in 1987 at the age of 71. Jackie Gleason's journey to fame and fortune was nothing short of incredible. In 1952, he signed a deal with CBS that made him one of the highest-paid entertainers ever. The contract was worth $11 million for 3 years, an amount that was unheard of at the time. But Jackie cared more about his work than just money. After only 1 season of The Honeymooners, he made the bold choice to end the show. He walked away from most of the money because he wanted the show to stay great. This decision wasn't about giving up. It was about protecting his legacy. To put that $11 million into perspective, it's worth about $100 to $25 million today. Jackie didn't stop there, though. He was a smart businessman and knew how to secure his future. In 1964, he made another big deal with CBS, earning $100,000 a year for over a decade, just to stop him from working with other networks. Beyond acting, he found success in surprising ways. Even though he couldn't read or write music, he made mood music albums that became huge hits. Many sold over 1 million copies and stayed on the charts for years. Jackie had a talent for turning his ideas into success. Jackie's wealth allowed him to live out his wildest dreams. In the 1950s, he built a home like no other in Peekskill, New York. It was called the UFO House because it looked like something out of space. The property had 2 round buildings, a main house he called the Mothership, and a guest house called the Scout Ship. Building it cost $650,000 back then, which would be around $7 million today. Jackie wanted everything to be perfect. The house had no straight walls. Everything was round to match its spaceship theme. He even hired a shipbuilder to design it in an airplane hangar before moving it piece by piece to his land. No expense was spared. Jackie bought an entire marble quarry in Italy just to make sure he had enough for the house. He flew an Italian craftsman to work on site, ensuring the quality was flawless. The house was packed with luxuries, including 4 bars, multiple swimming pools, a recording studio, and a library filled with books about UFOs and the paranormal. It wasn't just a house, it was a reflection of Jackie's larger-than-life personality. When Jackie Gleason passed away in 1987, at the age of 71, he left behind a fortune. At the time, his net worth was about $10 million, which would be around $25 million today. But his earnings didn't stop after his death. His role as Ralph Cramden in The Honeymooners kept bringing in money through reruns and licensing deals. Even though the show only had 39 episodes, its popularity never faded. Jackie's decision to end the show early helped keep its quality high, making it a timeless classic. Jackie's music albums also continued to sell, finding new audiences long after his passing. His movie roles, like Minnesota Fats in The Hustler and his part in the Smokey and the Bandit series, added even more to his legacy. These films brought in royalties from TV broadcasts, home video sales, and streaming, ensuring Jackie's work stayed relevant. Jackie Gleason's relationship with his daughters, Geraldine and Linda, was complicated. They were born in 1939 and 1942, growing up while their father became one of the most famous entertainers in America. But fame came at a price. Jackie was rarely home. His work kept him busy, and his love for partying and drinking made him even less present. His marriage to their mother, Genevieve Halford, was rocky, with constant fights and separations. This left Geraldine and Linda in a home that didn't feel stable. Linda once shared a memory about her father coming home drunk at 3 a.m. He would wake her and her sister up to play with him. At the time, it felt exciting because it was their dad. But later, she realized how unusual and unhealthy it was. In 1954, their mother had enough and filed for a legal separation, saying Jackie drank too much and was unfaithful. The court made Jackie pay $100 a week for each daughter, which helped financially, but they still didn't get the attention they wanted from him. Geraldine, the older daughter, wrote years later that she felt like she was competing with the world for her dad's love. He was a huge star to everyone else, but to her, he was just the father who was never there. Linda followed in her dad's footsteps and became an actress. While this gave them something in common, it also made life harder for her. People constantly compared her to Jackie, expecting her to be as funny as him, which she found exhausting. Even though their relationship was strained, there were moments when Jackie tried to make things right. In 1986, a year before he passed away, he invited both daughters to his home in Florida. They spent 2 weeks together, and Geraldine said it was both wonderful and sad. It was great to finally have his full attention, but it reminded her of all the lost years. Jackie's distant relationship with his daughters also carried over to his grandchildren. Jason Patrick, Linda's son, barely knew his grandfather. Jason met him only twice, once when he was 4 and again when he was 16. Linda didn't talk much about Jackie around Jason. She didn't want her son to feel the same pressure or hurt she had growing up with such a famous parent. Jason later said this gave him the freedom to build his acting career on his own, without the weight of his grandfather's name. But he also admitted that he sometimes wished he had gotten to know Jackie and learn from him. When Jackie died in 1987, his will showed how disconnected the family had become. Most of his $6 million estate went to his third wife, Marilyn Taylor Gleason. Geraldine and Linda received $100,000 each, which some felt was too little given how wealthy he was. Jason and the other grandchildren were left out entirely. Geraldine said the small inheritance reflected how distant Jackie had been as a father. Linda, however, said money was never the real issue. What she and her sister had always wanted was more of his time and love. Jackie Gleason's life was full of contrasts. He was loved by millions for his role as Ralph Cramden on The Honeymooners. The show became a classic, and his work in music and film brought him even more fame. But while he made the world laugh, he struggled to be there for his own family. His grandson Jason later said that Jackie felt more like a myth than a real person in their family. Even with his flaws, Jackie's legacy remains strong. Statues and theaters have been dedicated to him, and his work continues to entertain people to this day. But for his family, his story is a mix of pride and pain, as they remember both the man who was the Great One and the father they barely knew.